arrived and camped in the desert of Sinai next to the mountain, while Moses went up to God in verses 1 through 3. And then God tells him, if you will indeed obey my voice and keep my covenant, you shall be my treasured possession among all peoples, for all the earth is mine. And you shall be to me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. That's verses 5 through 6. And the people agreed to do all that the Lord commanded, if only. Right? Well, I got the word covenant in red because that's the topic for this. I wanted to talk about what is a covenant. And the floor is yours. What is a covenant? Agreement, treaty, or contract. That's good. Any other thoughts on that? Between two parties? Maybe the word promises comes to mind. There's a solemn nature to it as well. When we're talking about covenants, we're talking about an agreement, sure. You ever heard the phrase, to cut a deal? Why use the word cut? Because it has something to do with covenants. The phrasing for making a covenant is actually, looking at the Hebrew again, to cut a covenant. Cutting a covenant. Glenn?
It to be binding.
It's binding, yes. And it's binding by blood, is what I'm getting at. The word cut a covenant has reference to a cutting ceremony. And there's actually quite a few scriptures to look at this. There's one that kind of references the nature of a cutting ceremony where you not only kill an animal, you divide it in half, separate the halves, and make the people entering into the covenant walk between the halves, invoking a curse upon them if they break covenant. There's reference to that in the New Testament, or in the Old Testament. There's kind of references to that in a wedding ceremony. There's just, an interesting, solemn nature to the word covenant. We're not just talking about an agreement and a promise. We're talking about something that has death associated with it, blood associated with it. That's how serious it is that we're talking about. And sure, you can be sure that there is death that took place to kind of to seal this covenant. Knowing this, I think it's important to consider the severity of keeping your covenants, right? It's important to keep the covenant that we're under with Christ, that he cut with his own blood. I'm not saying that all covenants have the same kind of ceremony, but I am saying that there's some severity to the word covenant, and I just wanted to bring that out. Then the other thing I wanted to ask y'all is, what is God offering Israel and letting them become his treasured possession? What are the terms here that we read? Or I actually quoted the scriptures there, so it should be faithful. What is God offering them? He said, if you will obey my voice, keep my covenant, you shall be what? My treasured possession, because all the earth is mine, but you're going to be my treasured possession. Doesn't that tell you something? Who is God the God of?
All good.
What's that?
All good.
All good? Well, that's what I'm really asking is who is he the God of? All creation, right? I mean, he made everybody. They all should be worshiping him, shouldn't they? Just because he's calling the Israelites his treasured possession, does that mean he doesn't own and claim all the earth? Does he not here say, all the earth is mine? So shouldn't all the earth be worshiping this God? Yeah, they should be. But they don't have what you might call favored treatment, as the Israelites will have. You will be my treasured possession. God is treating them with a particular amount of attention so that he can fulfill a certain promise to a certain man named Abraham, which, by the way, isn't just for Abraham, but for how many nations of the earth? All the families of the earth. The promise to Abraham is actually a promise for all the families of the earth to benefit, not just the Israelites. So it's not about favoritism. It's about God's election and choice and how he wants to bring about his promise to bless all the earth. And lastly, I wanted to bring out with this slide here, what is a kingdom of priests? And what is a holy nation? You think about what he's asking, what he's offering them. I guess I'm asking you to highlight some thoughts on the idea of holiness for me, or what is a priest, and how do we apply this to a nation of priests, a nation of holy people? Yes, sir.
I was recently doing some studying for this, and one of the things that I found was interesting that kind of jumped out at me, and there's a parallel to it. So, a Navy guy, and so when the Navy deploys, they have the carrier in the middle, and then because the carrier is the most important, the carrier is what can exert America's will across the world, and then they build defense in depth, and they have planes and submarines and frigates and all of these things all around the carrier to protect the carrier, right? And so it's interesting because I was reading later on in Exodus, and one of the things we see is when they're establishing their dwelling for the night, that the tribe of Levi, the Levites, would be in the middle with the with the temple, and all of the other 11 tribes would establish themselves around the perimeter to protect the priests, right? And so I think it's very interesting that that even among this separate and special people, that there is this core that comes out of the tribe of Levi that is they are able to approach God, and they are able to have communion with God. And so really, when I look at that, that's one of the things that he's offering is, hey, I'm going to let you have direct communication with me, right?
Yeah.
I'm going to allow you to have intercession for your entire nation. You're the only nation on the entire earth that's going to be able to have that, right? And again, hinging on the idea that you will obey my voice and you will keep my commandments, right? And so with the second part of your question, when you say, what does it mean to be a holy nation? Well, holy is going to be separate, unique, set apart, right? And so how are they separate, unique, set apart? Well, they're obeying his voice and they're obeying his commandments, right? The other nations might say, well, we all say, well, yeah, there's a God. We should worship the God, right? But who has the commandments of this is what God expects, right? If you think about the confusion of this time period, we just spent a couple of different, class periods here talking about Egypt had all of these gods for everything.
Right.
And different nations had all of these different gods that explained all of the things. Well, here he's saying, I am one God. Here's all of my expectations. And if you follow my expectations, then you, by proxy, will be holy. You will be set apart because you will look different.
And I wanted to highlight something like the fact that you say God speaks to the priests. Who does God speak the Ten Commandments to? Was it just Moses? Was it not in the hearing of all Israel? We're going to see, I think, a little bit later on, though, as we read this, God is calling the whole nation to come before him and meet with him. This is the only time this is going to happen. God is inviting all the nation to hear him and see him. And this is the only time this is going to happen. And I think it's important that God says, I am going to offer you to become a kingdom of priests. This is before Levi is ever singled out. Okay? Understand, this is before the Levitical priesthood was even thought of. that the nation was invited to become a priesthood itself. When does this actually get fulfilled? Later in the New Testament, Peter actually quotes this passage and calls Christians this exact thing. He's quoting the Greek Bible out of the Old Testament, but he's applying it to us, Christians. It's interesting to me that this doesn't actually happen in its entirety until Christ enables it to happen for us. But he's offering them something that they're actually going to turn down. Okay? They're going to say, no, we can't have this. We want Moses to be our go-between. But that's not what God is offering them. God is actually offering that they all become priests. And there is a level of priesthood before the Levitical priesthood here that probably has something to do with the fact that God sanctified every firstborn and said, you are consecrated to me. Has some relevance to that, I think. But as we go along, he tells them, okay, I want you all to consecrate yourself. Prepare to meet your God. We have a song about that, don't we? The song title is this exact thing, Prepare to Meet Thy God. God says, I am coming to you in a thick cloud that the people may hear when I speak with you. Now he's talking to Moses there. I'm coming to you in a thick cloud that the people may hear when I speak with you and may believe you forever. Now, we'll highlight that again. But God says, consecrate the people and be ready for the third day, for on the third day the Lord will come down on Mount Sinai in the sight of all the people. And God said, set limits for the people all around. Whoever touches the mountain shall be put to death. No hand shall touch him, but he shall be stoned or shot. Maybe with a sling or something. God said, when the trumpet sounds a long blast, they shall all come up to the mountain. Well, why will God speak in the sight and the hearing of all Israel? What did he just say? And you can reference the point there. I have the verse for you to check it. Verse 9. I'm coming to you in a thick cloud so that they may hear when I speak with you, Moses, and stop questioning your authority, right? Because ever since they came out of Egypt, it's been, why did you bring us out of here? To die? And should we be following this guy? I mean, there was a point in which they were ready to stone him. And God is making it absolutely unquestionable. God is talking with this man Moses. He is directing him, and he is not speaking of his own accord. And Moses says so plenty of times, but to me this is very interesting. It's very much like what happened with Jesus. You remember the incident in John 12 where Jesus was, I think he was about to raise Lazarus from the dead. And he said, Father, glorify your name. And then a voice thundered from heaven, I have glorified it, and I will glorify it again. And some were disputing. Some said they heard thunder. Others said they heard an angel speaking to him. And Jesus says, this voice came for your benefit, not for mine. This is exactly the same reason God is speaking at Mount Sinai, the Ten Commandments, the way he's going to speak them. He's going to thunder them. Everybody's going to hear it. Everybody's going to see this thick volcanic activity. The mountain looks like it's going to just explode. And yet there's this humongous sound of a trumpet, and God is speaking. They could understand, apparently, the Ten Commandments, so that some could say, well, an angel was speaking, so that they could believe. And interestingly, some did not believe, even with the incident with Jesus. But God does not do his work in secret, is what I wanted to draw out with this. God does not do his work in secret. Like with what a cult leader might do, right? Somebody who comes to you and says, I am speaking to God, and here's a message from God. Does God expect you to believe somebody who just says they spoke to God in a corner somewhere? At what point did God do that, beginning an entire religion? I don't think he ever did. In fact, King Agrippa could believe the gospel since Paul said this thing wasn't done in a corner, with Jesus being raised from the dead and shown to all these people. God doesn't work that way, in secret. So God was making Israel to know. Here's the reason you can believe in Moses and in the covenant that he was making. God was making Israel a kingdom of priests, showing to them a measure of his glory, as the high priest would later witness in the innermost holy place. God would speak in a cloud over the mercy seat in the Holy of Holies. That's something only the high priest would be able to see. And this incident is very special because all the people were able to see and hear something akin to that. This proves God's desire to make them a nation of priests and to reconcile them all to himself, to bring them all to himself. It was his idea to bring them all to himself at once, not just one man once a year, at least at first. How are the people to sanctify themselves in 3 days to prepare to meet their God? Real quick, we'll just kind of, I'll just ask, do y'all know the ways? Go ahead.
They were supposed to wash their clothes and get them prepared.
Wash their garments. Priests have to do that, by the way, before they serve. Wash their clothes before they serve. What else?
Like when you're a woman,
Yeah, that's interesting. Moses brought that up. And I don't want to say that he added to what God said, but maybe he's giving us more information. But you're right, don't go near a woman. Why do you think that would have been stated? Sure.
It's interesting because we see in the New Testament when Paul's talking about fasting, right? And the idea of a husband and a wife should not abstain from one another unless they are fasting to draw near to God.
Yeah.
Right, and so we kind of see this idea that there's something about withholding yourself or not allowing your flesh to be fulfilled.
Yeah.
So that you can draw closer to God.
Yeah, it allows you to and Paul says something like that. The married person has to worry about how to please his wife. The unmarried person gets to focus all his attention on pleasing the Lord. There's something to that, but there's also this. If you were a priest and you defiled yourself or made yourself unclean while serving, you could die. It makes you unclean until evening to be intimate with even your wife as a Hebrew, as a Jew. They were to absolutely prepare their minds, their bodies, their state of cleanness. Do not become unclean while you are near the Lord. And that is a very strict rule that not just the lesson of Nadab and Abihu comes to mind, but even after that, all the things that Moses was worried about with the aftermath of that. Don't show any signs of grief, Aaron. That would make you unclean. You would probably die. Don't do that. It's just very interesting how very cautious they must be.
And real quick, one of the things that
Sure.
this reminds me of is how quickly we discount the Levite and the priest in the parable of the Good Samaritan. Because we forget about how strictly they held themselves to not becoming ceremonially unclean.
Mm-hmm.
And there were plenty of things that would make them ceremonially unclean,
Yeah.
including helping someone beat nearly to death. And so it's like, it still didn't excuse them. That was obviously God reprimanding them for that behavior. It
Yeah.
helps us understand how distorted, right, that they had ultimately got to the point of not even being able to help their fellow man as, kind of testimony against them from what God originally intended.
Sure. Yeah. And it wasn't meant for you to show apathy, to distance yourself from doing good deeds. It would be inconceivable to say it was sinful to become unclean at all. You couldn't help it in many cases. It wasn't about necessarily that, oh, uncleanness makes you sinful, but it was used as an illustration, and certainly not used as an excuse to keep yourself from doing good works. But prepare to meet your God, because you're going to need all the wits around you that you can muster so that you don't just lose your sanity when he makes his appearance, because it's that fearful. I mean, John, who said perfect love casts out fear, is the same guy who wrote the Apocalypse, and when he saw the vision of Jesus, he fell as one dead. He fell as one dead. It's crazy scary when the Lord makes an appearance. And if you don't think it is, you're not consecrating yourself. You're not preparing yourself. Prepare to meet your God. We'll go ahead and skip. I don't think I have too much to say more beyond that. Exodus 19 kind of ends with this idea of the mountain that can't be touched. And there's, of course, a New Testament passage that is in Hebrews 12 that speaks to the Christian and says, you know, you've not come to that mountain that can't be touched, this thunder, lightning, fire, greatly trembling mountain, very thick cloud smoke, a loud trumpet blast, and so that the people trembled. Even Moses said, I fear terribly. Interesting narration here. Moses spake, and God thundered in an answer. We have no idea what Moses said. But Moses said something, and God responded with thunder, so that everybody heard when he speaks, God speaks in return. They're talking to each other. And then God called Moses to come up to the mountain, and God says, now you go return, warn these people and the priests. And it's interesting how he groups this people and priests together in this context. Return and warn the people and priests not to break through the mountain's limits. Lord, you already told us to set limits. Yeah, well, go tell them anyway. You know, let the priests consecrate themselves. Go. Make sure they don't try to break through to see me, you know. But go and come back and bring Aaron with you. Aaron is singled out. And so, I think he goes down, and before he gets to come back up and bring Aaron back up, he's there with the people such that God speaks in the presence of all of them so that they can even say to Moses, Moses, go up there and intercede for us. I think he's there with them when we're in chapter 20, so that they're all together when the Ten Commandments are uttered. In chapter 20, God spoke all these words, saying, I am the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of... Guys, we're going to get to the golden calf. It is a joke that they said, this is the guy that brought you out of the land of Egypt. And I mean, you contrast that with this scene here of a mountain that's about to blow up, and thunder and trumpet. I mean, this is just incomparable to some stupid little golden calf etched on a golden plate or whatever they've made. You got to be kidding me. And there's a reason God says this. I am the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. You shall have no other gods before me. Now, do y'all know let's see if we can you call them out before I put them up? I already said the first one. You shall have no other gods before me. What's the second one?
No graven image.
You shall not make any graven images. What's the third one? Oops. You shall not profane or take the Lord your not take the name of the Lord your God in vain. You shall keep the Sabbath.
Honor your father and mother.
Honor your father and mother. That is your parents. You shall not murder.
Do not murder, do not commit adultery.
Steal.
Do not commit adultery. Somebody's looking. That's okay. You can look.
Don't steal,
You shall not steal.
don't covet.
Shall not bear false witness. And that just leaves you shall not covet. Which one is the greatest command? that was a trick question there.
Love your neighbor.
You shall love the Lord your God. What was Jesus' answer? That's what's interesting. What's the greatest command here? And Jesus' answer isn't even on the list, but it is the list. Look at this. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart. That's the first 4. And you shall love your neighbor as yourself. That's the 5 through 10. The first 4 relate to how you relate to God. And the next 6, how you relate to your fellow man. And Jesus' response is quoting other passages. He's quoting Deuteronomy 6:10, which says, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and your soul and your strength. And he's also quoting, you shall love your neighbors yourself, out of Leviticus 19, verse 18. But it perfectly summarizes the 10 commandments, so that when he's asked, what's the greatest law, he could even be talking about them. But how wonderful that he sums it all up. What's the difference between the first 2? You shall have no other gods, and you shall not make graven images. This is a subtle thing, but I think it's worth noting. The first one is who you might worship. And the second one is how you might worship that one. Yeah?
Some of it is too, okay, you have no other gods. Maybe there's something that makes you think something's actually a god, Zeus or whatever, might be at the time, right?
Yeah.
But then the graven image is you as man saying, that chair is my God, and I bestow these powers on it.
Yeah.
That's a lot of times what they would do.
Yeah. And
What they did with the calf.
yeah, exactly.
I mean, they made this calf. Give me all your jewelry. Let me melt it down. And they made this object. Their own craftsmanship. They made it. Then they, being the same people, bestowed God powers to it. So really, they're human beings. They're mortal, sinful men bestowing these powers on them.
Yep. And really what they're doing is reducing God to this image. You were made in whose image? God's image. Was God made in your image? Was God made in the image of a cat? Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, by having both phrases, you really covered the idea that a God to us could be money. It could be fame. It could be a lot of things, right? But now you've covered it all.
Yeah.
So.
And Deuteronomy 4, I wanted to show. Oh, go ahead, Robert. Sorry.
Well, sometimes I think we don't always realize that, blessings that God gives us are not worth more value than God himself. Sometimes we get so wrapped up in what God can do for me, as opposed to just simply serving him no matter what, even if God may not necessarily lead us down a direction that we had in mind. We reduce God to, just someone who just, gives you something, will give you something good if you do these things.
Yeah.
We can distort the image of God. Today, if we're not careful, we may not necessarily think of some carved idol, but, something that seems good,
Yeah.
if we put it on a different level of where it ought to be, we just have to be mindful.
And I think we're naturally curious. What does God look like? What is God really like? Deuteronomy 4 says, watch yourselves very carefully, since you saw no form on the day the Lord spoke to you at Horeb out of the midst of the fire. Beware, lest you act corruptly by making a carved image for yourself in the form of any figure, the likeness of male or female, the likeness of any animal that is on the earth, the likeness of any winged bird, or anything that creeps on the ground, any fish. Beware lest your eyes look to the heavens when you see the sun and the moon and the stars and the host of heaven, and you be drawn away. You bow down and you serve them. One leads to the other. I think commandment 2 primes you for obeying commandment 1. If you don't reduce God to some natural thing and suppress the truth of God and put him in as Romans 1 tells you not to do. Make him after the creature rather than the creator. If you don't do that, you probably won't worship that thing that you're trying to characterize God into. I didn't mean to ignore you. Go ahead.
In the paper that we got, it says God is above any and everything that can be created in this world, and nothing created should be worshipped to represent him. That's
Yes.
his whole goal. He did not want people having some kind of image, and that's his purpose of it.
And I think there's a danger to saying a lot of people entertain, what's heaven going to be like? And they try to characterize it with, we're going to be golfing all day in heaven.
Yeah.
Well, what does that say about you in golf?
Yeah. You really
You got to watch out, right? I mean, no joke. Go ahead, Robert.
I mean, in an odd way, you could look at the Ten Commandments as simply God just stating to you, know your place. A few months back, I preached on the very end of the Gospels. It's mentioned that Jesus did many other things. What were these other things? You look at just the first 10 chapters of Genesis, you have characters who lived over 900 years, and you're lucky to get one or two verses out of that. Why did God not tell their histories? Well, we don't really know. There is a lot that God has done that we don't know about.
Yeah.
But what we ought not to do is try to, say what he has not said and just simply know our place, know what he has presented to us straight to us in his word, and be content with that.
Yeah. I'm running out of time, but I want to try to, I had a lot more meditations on these. I'm sorry, guys, but I am happy that we got as far as we did. Maybe I can sneak this in. How might one violate the third commandment? Now, kind of inherent in this is the question, do we need to worry about these? Are we subject to them? But let's put that aside for now. And imagine that it's good to honor the name of God, even as a Christian. I know that's crazy, but how might you profane the name of? And the verse can be translated a couple different ways. You shall not take the name of your Lord in vain. The word for take is interesting, and the word vain is interesting. The word take can actually mean lift up, carry, as you are doing in a worship service, lifting up, carrying, bearing up the name of God. It could have reference to vain worship. Glenn?
In the New Testament, it's
Blasphemy? Yeah, blaspheming is an obvious sinful thing to do. And you're carrying the name of the Lord in vain. Vain could mean emptiness, falsehood, nothingness. And I'm out of time. But meditate on that. Think about that. How might you take God's name? Imagine that you are, even as a Christian, you must honor the name of God. Okay? I know that's yet to be proven, but I don't think it's going to be hard. How would you fail at that? How would you carry up his name in vain? Just something to think about. All right, thank you for your time.
he's going to do something that he will not do.
Say that again?
I said, if you do it in vain, you give it something that his nature or his being will not let him do.
Mm-hmm.
Like you say, oh, God lied.
Oh, right.
That's
It's not in his nature to do that.
That's taking it in vain.
Mm-hmm.
But his nature will not let him do it either.
Right. Yeah. There's a few ways you could do it. Definitely lying is one of them. That's actually one of them called out in Scripture. You could